Hello, this is Daniel from soundheadquarters.com. In today's episode, we are building these huge acoustic ceiling clouds and transforming the space from that to this. Come along with us step by step as we go through the whole build process and installation process for these ceiling clouds. So let's get right into it. We are starting off with 5/8 inch thick plywood. That is our building material for this job. And we are going to go ahead and get all of our rip cuts. So these panels are going to be 5 3/4 inch thick, the frames. So we're rip cutting a whole bunch of these sheets. This is going to be our main material. This is going to make up all the tops and bottoms and sides of our panel frames. Next, we are ripping at 5 1/8 inch thick. This is going to make up the center braces inside the panel frames. And then the last rip cut we are doing is 2 3/4 inch. And this is going to make up the top and bottom and backs of the braces. So now that we have all of our rip cuts done, now we can cut to final size. So all of our tops and bottoms and braces are all going to be cut to 2 feet long. And then our tops, or our sides rather, are going to be cut to whatever you want the final height of these panels to be. For this client, he ordered 6 feet tall for the angled sections of his ceiling and then 44 inches tall for the flat section of his ceiling. So that is what we are doing here. We are building 14 6-foot tall frames and 7 44-inch tall frames. So we're just getting everything cut to size. I like to just get all of my materials cut and then I can just do assembly all in one shot. So there is the material for 7 of our 14 6-foot tall, 2-foot wide frames. And now we are using our 18 gauge nailer and some wood glue to assemble. So this right here is the top and the bottom. We're using a 5 3/4 inch piece glued and nailed to a 2 3/4 inch piece. That makes up our tops and bottoms of these panel frames. And then this right here is the center brace. So we're using that 5 1/8 piece along with one of the 2 3/4 inch pieces and just gluing it and nailing it like that to create a center brace. And you'll see that come together in the assembly right here. So there you can see we added our top and bottom. Now we're gluing and nailing to our sides. These are the 6-foot tall frames. And now we can add 2 braces into the middle of these frames. And I cut out a spacer so that I have consistent spacing for those braces. So now I am adding wood screws and I'm making sure that I'm drilling with a countersink bit. And that way the screws do not poke into the fabric at all. And that spacer that I made for the braces in the middle is just under 2 feet long. That way our insulation, which is 2 feet by 4 feet, when you cut that in half, we are able to use that full bat of insulation with no waste. And then only that center section was about 22 inches. And as you'll see later during the installation process, you'll see how we minimized waste by doing the braces like that. So now we are cutting all of the wood, getting everything prepped for our 44-inch tall panel frames. So the exact same process there, just doing our rip cuts, 1 rip cut at 5 3/4, 1 at 5 1/8, and then 1 at 2 3/4. And then we just follow that same assembly process where we glue and nail our tops and bottoms and braces. And these 44-inch tall frames only require 1 brace right in the center, since the span is less than 4 feet, which is a piece of insulation. So now we can move on to the back fabric. And this is just a standard yard fabric that you would use for like weed control outdoors. It's just a easy, cheap fabric that works well, and I'm just stapling it into those cavities there. And now you can see that we have all of the panel frames with the rear fabric. Now we can move on to the insulation. So as the fill for these panels, we're adding 3 inches of Owens Corning pink, the fiberglass insulation. This is a lower density material than what we're going to add to the front face of the panel frames. For the front faces, we're going to be adding Owens Corning 703, and that is a rigid yellow fiberglass insulation. And we're going to be starting that process on site at the client's house. So we got the trailer loaded up with all the frames and insulation, and here is the client's site. This is a garage conversion that they turned into a studio, and they did all of the isolated walls and 5/8 drywall, all that good stuff. So it's a really cool canvas for these clouds. Here is the Owens Corning 703. This is what it looks like. This is 2-inch thick, rigid fiberglass acoustic insulation. And we're going to cut this to size with an X-Acto knife, and just using that spacer as a straight edge. And it's important that we get these cuts nice and vertical so that they fit snugly into the acoustic panel frames. There you can see we're cutting out that middle section there. And there you go. Those are the insulated panel frames. So those are now ready for fabric. Before we add the fabric, I'm just adding packing tape around the perimeter of these panel frames. And this is just so that since these panels are going to be hanging, we don't want that insulation to ever come loose or sag into the fabric over time. So just adding that packing tape along all of the edges just helps secure that insulation if there are any that ever do come loose over time. So now we're just using that same fabric that we used for the back of the panel to do a light upholstery over the front face of the panel. And that is going to act as the liner for our final fabric, which is right here. This is Guilford of Maine. This is the opal color, and this is a fully acoustic rated and fire rated. It's a commercial acoustic fabric. So it's a very nice fabric to work with for these panels. It looks great and it performs really well as well. Here's a close-up detail of how I'm doing the corner upholstery there, and you can see I'm almost just kind of gift wrapping it and folding it in on itself so I can get like a nice flat line right along those corners. And there you can see the final upholstered panel. Just those little upholstery detail touches adds a lot of finesse and just kind of quality to the final look of the panels. So take your time with the upholstery and really make sure you get everything to lay nice and flat and not over tightened, no wrinkles, all that good stuff, because it turns out looking really nice. So now that everything is upholstered, we can get into adding all of the hardware. So I'm measuring in 2 1/4 inches from each corner, and you can see that the way that we built these panel frames with the braces, it provides us a solid area of wood that we can secure hanging hardware into these panel frames. So we just use those small circular eye hook screws, and now that we have them screwed in all 4 corners, we can go ahead and measure where our hardware is on the panel. That way, once we know how wide and long the hardware is on the panel, we can transfer those measurements to the ceiling for the installation process. So we went ahead and did that for the 6-foot tall panels and for the 44-inch tall panels. That way we know what our measurements for to start layout right now. So here you can see the blank canvas of ceiling that we are working with. We ended up doing 7 rows of 3, and we consulted with the client before they added the drywall and the lighting to kind of map out the lighting to allow for this perfectly. So right now we're just doing our layout at the very front of the room, and we're just mounting these panels equally on those angled walls and then equally on the flat wall, the top section there. So here are the drywall anchors we're using. It's the metal drywall anchors, and these just screw into the ceiling. It's great that they used 2 layers of 5/8 drywall for this build, which gives us a ton of meat for these anchors to bite into. So I have no issues in terms of supporting the weight of those 2 by 6 foot panels. So we are getting the same hardware installed in the rear side of the room now. And then once we have the very front and very rear side of the hardware in, then we can shoot the laser across those hardware points, and just like we are right now. And then that way, all of our hardware that gets mounted for all 7 rows of these clouds is all going to be in line with each other throughout the whole span of the room. This is a super tedious step, and this would have taken us a lot less time if we had 2 or more lasers going at once. It took a bunch of time having to constantly move just one laser. So if you guys are doing something of this scale, I recommend having a bunch of lasers on site. Really would help speed up the layout process, but it's all doable with whatever tools you do have. So there you can see all of the hardware is in, and you can see from using that laser, all of the hardware for all of these rows of panels is just perfectly in line. It's a really important detail step that creates the final product that we're looking for. So those there that were on screen right there are the locking quick links, and those are just essentially like a threaded connector, and we're just connecting the hooks that are into the ceiling into the hooks that are in the panels. And at this stage, when you're actually hanging them with those locking quick links, this is probably the most easy and simple step of this whole build, because everything just lines up as long as you did your measurements right and you just lock them in with those locking quick links, and that's it. So using the scaffold and the ladders, we were able to just kind of move along each row, get them all mounted, and remove any tape or anything from layout that we had up there during the process. And there's the last row going up right there, and here's the finished product. So a ton of work, a lot of finesse, and a lot of super tedious measurement, but here you can see the final result. You can see everything lining up perfectly, and aside from how great this looks, the sonic difference was incredible. We have a lot of cool stuff coming, more from this build. We got bass traps, probably some wall treatment coming along, so please stay tuned. This has been Daniel from Sound Headquarters. Peace out.